Well, speaking of other perspectives, this has been Alternative Ideas, and we want to take a moment here to say thank you for all those who came along and listened. This really started as an exercise where David and I knew that AI was a big deal, especially in our industry. I wanted to learn some more about it. And honestly, the podcast was a way for us to be disciplined and actually have to once a week focus on some of those headlines and think about them. But also, I think a reaction from both of us to the fact that people were either saying AI was the coolest thing that ever happened ever, or was the most horrible thing that ever happened ever. And I think both of us had kind of an opinion that, yeah, that's rarely the case. There's generally a mixed bag here. And so maybe some different ways of looking at it would help us do that, because I don't know. And I don't know this is exactly true, David, but to some extent, I think we are a little bit on each side of those camps, right? I tend to look at AI mostly and go, that's a terrible thing that happened. And I think you've got a little bit of a technical brain that looks at it and goes, that's a really cool thing that happened. And yet, in each of those cases, there's generally an alternative. And so by talking to each other, I think I've seen some opportunities I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And perhaps we've also been able to identify some dangers as well. So we've been delighted for you guys to come along in what was kind of a personal exercise. And then we decided, hey, this might be interesting. Other people might be intrigued. And we've had some really great comments from you, some really great feedback. We're going to move to some other projects now. I feel like we've done some due diligence this summer, and as our academic year kicks up, we're pretty busy in some other things. I don't know if this is the end of the podcast, but at least it's a pause while we sort of see where AI is going next and how we're going to kind of continue to discuss it. But please do pay attention to Unbound, which is where our podcasts are. We have a Be Unbound podcast, which is getting ready to start up again soon, and some other podcast projects that we're working on that we think in the next couple of weeks and probably a month or so will be up and running. And so if this was interesting to you, you will have to put up with my annoying voice, but you will be able to admire David's wonderful radio voice, either in the AI podcast or some other places going forward. So, David, any other thoughts for our listeners as we close out this final episode of this first season?
Yeah, I think that you just put it really well. And I think that what ultimately can make this a really valuable thing, and what I hope people can take away from this, is that even if you are not the foremost expert on something, and even if you don't have just the fullmost understanding of it, I think just having conversations with someone else and actually, as we just talked about, getting other perspectives is really helpful, especially when you're trying to wrestle with a really big, potentially world-changing concept like AI has become. And so just being able to look at different things that are happening and going on around it, and not getting caught up in the media frenzy that tends to happen with issues like this, and just being able to have a grounded conversation with somebody else that is taking it seriously, and you understand where they're coming from too, and being able to say, let's take a look at this and let's see if we're lining up on this, or is my own reaction to this reasonable, and just having conversations about it is a really helpful thing. And so I think that's something that we try to facilitate a lot in Unbound through a lot of the programs that we facilitate for students and training young adults to be able to think critically about things. And one of the most essential parts of doing that is doing that in community, not just trying to figure out how to live a full life on your own. Is that you're designed to be able to work through challenges, even things like understanding what's going on in the world in the context of community. So I think that that's probably not what most people would expect when you would ask what's your takeaway from doing a podcast about artificial intelligence. But I think that's something that, at least for me personally, has been really helpful.
There's something really important about that, David. I mean, like, when faced with artificial intelligence, probably the wisest thing you can do is go talk to a human about it. And that, a C.S. Lewis chatbot is not going to do it. That there is a level of connection and emotional intelligence that happens in a relationship with somebody, especially somebody who knows you, that will never be replaced by AI. And I think maybe for me, if I had I think everything you said, David, is excellent. And so I hesitate to add anything much to that, other than to say, I think it took us to this last session for me, this last episode, and this idea of intelligence amplifying. I'll close with this little thing. I am skeptical of technology. And so one of the things that I try to do as a personal discipline is that, first of all, I use phones until they stop working, which is a little inconvenient when that happens. But so I'm not buying the latest gadget all the time. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying personally for me, that's a better way for me to use the technology. And then when I replace the phone, the first thing I do is I delete every single app off of it that I can possibly scrub, and I try to hide the rest. And then over the next couple of days and weeks, I only replace the apps that I actually use. And what I've discovered is that I only use a handful of apps, and then there's a few more that sort of find their way in over time as I need them for special applications. And I'm not making any claims here that this is the right way to do it. I'm just saying that this is a little discipline for me to remind myself that I use my technology doesn't use me. And so consequently, it's like, instead of going to bash in a bunch of nails because I have a hammer, I first decide I want to see the nails first and then go look and say, what's the best thing to drive those into the wall? Oh, it's a hammer. So I should go get the hammer. And so there's an element of kind of, having a bit of a screen and saying, am I using it or is it using me? And do I have a reason for it? And for me, the tool for AI has been this IA thing, intelligence amplifying, that we just talked about. That, if this is intelligence amplifying, then this is a use of AI that I'm pretty intrigued by. If this is not intelligence amplifying, but instead, so here's where the line would be drawn. If I ask AI to write an article and I expect it to write an article that I'm going to use, I don't think that's intelligence amplifying. That's a whole different thing, right? But if I write an article and then submit it to an AI and ask it to check it for grammar, or ask it to, if we had one of these closed systems and I said, are there any other points that you think would be interesting to put in here? And it's pulling from our own data set to do that. That is intelligence amplifying. That's using our own ideas and making them more efficient in some fashion. And I would say that I think feels like a very positive use of it. So I don't know if that's a magic bullet. I'm not saying that's the final thing. But for me, one of the things as we've gone through this journey over the last 9 episodes is that kind of boiled down to this, here's an interesting tool to be able to sort. Is AI usable? Is this a good use of AI or not? And a question I'm going to be asking is it amplifying my intelligence or is it replacing it? If it's amplifying it, good. If it's replacing it, probably a little suspect.
Hey, thank you for checking out this clip of the Alternative Ideas podcast. If you want to check out some of the other full episodes of this podcast or some other clips just like this one, you can check them all out here on the Alternative Ideas YouTube channel.